They didn't show up in the Philippines looking to conquer, invest, or change the world. They hit the ground running, literally. They were escaping a Europe that wanted them dead, fleeing war and persecution. Crossing the ocean wasn't about hope. It was a fire escape. When they landed on those unfamiliar islands, they weren't thinking about getting rich. They just wanted to stay alive. But from that desperation, a dynasty was born. It wasn't planned. It happened because it had to. History books love the loud guys, the generals, and the governments, but the real engine of the modern Philippine economy was built by outsiders who were trying their hardest to go unnoticed. In Manila, these refugees got into business because it was the best camouflage. If you're essential, you're safe. Trade was their shelter. Networks were their shield. Slowly, this family figured out that in a shaky country, being boring and stable beats being ambitious every time. For centuries, the Philippines had been pushed around by loud empires. This was different. Jewish families running from Europe found a unicorn here, a strategic spot, an open market, and a culture that didn't hate strangers. They played it smart. They worked with everyone, Filipinos, Americans, Chinese, Europeans. They listened before they moved. They built trust before they built bigger. While the colonial powers flexed, this family mastered the art of blending in. They stayed off the radar, but you felt their weight. If the supply chain broke, they fixed it. If the money dried up, they fronted it. Being the guy who actually shows up buys you a lot of pull. Eventually, that pull turns into permanence. These families outlasted wars and political shifts because they were built to ride out the storm, not fight the wind. Here is where the real story kicks off. Forget the mansions. It starts with just staying alive. It's about holding back, not showing off. Everything that came later stands on that foundation. Quick pause. Where are you watching from right now? If you are in North America, press 1. Europe, press 2. Asia, press 3. Anywhere else, press 4. If you are into secret histories, elite legacies, and how money really moves in the Philippines, hit that subscribe button and stick around. To keep surviving, they had to get bigger. Manila was safe, but to make it, they needed reach. We are talking ports, warehouses, and the big one, credit. In a market totally messed up by colonial transitions, speed didn't matter. Trust did. They chose to be the boring, reliable option while everyone else was chasing the quick buck and the spotlight. They started with the scraps, imports nobody wanted, routes nobody drove, deals too small for the old money crowd to care about. But those scraps gave them leverage. Moving goods between islands bridged gaps the economy had ignored for years. Every deal built a little more trust. Every handshake tightened the net. Bit by bit, they turned simple logistics into serious clout. Success paints a target on your back. The old guard got jealous. Regulations changed overnight. Global tensions threatened to cut off supplies. But chaos is great if you are ready for it. These guys spread their bets early: shipping, retail, finance. If one door slammed shut, they kicked open a window. When cash got tight, they moved credit quietly. In the bad times, they became indispensable, all while staying in the shadows. It went deeper than ink on paper. Local partners loved that they were consistent. American administrators loved that they were efficient. Chinese traders loved that they were fast. They learned to speak everyone's language without pledging allegiance to anyone. That flexibility was their armor when governments collapsed and regimes flipped. The Philippines wasn't just a hideout anymore. It was a training camp. This chapter is about building while the ground is shaking. We aren't talking about the skyscraper yet, just the steel beams holding it up. But the next part, that is going to test if this quiet machine can handle a head-on collision with history. Getting big gets you noticed. Quiet coordination turned into dominance, and people started asking questions. How are these guys moving goods so fast? Where is the capital coming from when everyone else is broke? How are their contracts surviving political changes? It wasn't illegal, it was just invisible. That was the trick. They knew real power lasts longer when nobody knows who to confront. Now, business crashes into politics, not running for office, but having the keys to the back door. We are talking access to ports, to the people in charge, to those moments when the rules are still being written. They didn't scream for laws to change, they just waited in the right rooms. By controlling the flow goods, loans, timing, they steered the ship without touching the wheel. In a country broken up by islands, if you control the flow, you control the stability. They turned that fragmentation into an advantage. The world got shaky, and the pressure cooked everyone else. Supply lines snapped, banks closed, competitors folded. But these families, they had been practicing for this. They had assets everywhere and friends in every camp. Redundancy saved them. While everyone else was reacting, they were 3 moves ahead. It looked like luck. It was actually math. Inside the family, things got military. You didn't grow just to get rich. You grew to get tougher. Risk wasn't about profit. It was about survival. They trained the kids young, sent them to schools abroad, but kept them grounded in local realities. This was the shift. They weren't just riding the system anymore, they were the ones keeping it upright. Now things escalate. Their influence was baked into the foundation, but the stakes just went through the roof. The next page of history was about to see if whisper-quiet power could survive a screaming crisis. Then the war hit, and the illusion of safety shattered. Roots cut, markets dead. Real fear, sharper than ever. For most businesses, that was a wrap. For the prepared, it was game time. They knew peace was just a break between disasters. Being ready was the only thing that mattered. As the war squeezed the islands, everything ran out. Goods vanished. Credit froze. The government needed help, fast. Phones rang, secret stockpiles opened up, networks went live. While the world panicked, this family moved with surgical precision, redirecting supplies and keeping the heartbeat of commerce going under extreme stress. Being reliable wasn't just a slogan anymore. It was a lifeline. Crisis shows you how power really works. Being seen could get you killed, so they went dark. Decisions happened in back rooms, way off the front page. Every choice was a gamble, legal, financial, moral. Some moves saved the business, some saved actual lives. It wasn't just about them anymore. They had employees, partners, and whole towns counting on them to survive. The stress inside the family was brutal. Fights broke out, stay neutral or pick a side, expand or hide. But survival came first. They locked it down. No emotions, just logic. In times like that, your legacy isn't what you take, it's what you turn down. You fail this test, you are dust. You pass, you change forever. When the smoke cleared, the board looked totally different. The competition was wiped out. The system hit reset. The ones left standing weren't just players, they were the pillars holding it all up. What happened next took them from the business section to the history books. The fighting stopped, but the mess remained. Broken infrastructure, fragile institutions, zero confidence. Most people wanted to run and hide. These families saw a chance to rewrite their position. They knew rebuilding wasn't a race. It was a trust exercise. This phase decided who got to write the future and who got left in the past. Business crawled back to life. Money moved like molasses. Trust had to be earned all over again, island by island. They didn't swoop in like vultures. They acted like anchors. Financing repairs, fixing routes, waking up dead markets. By doing the heavy lifting when everyone else was weak, they cemented their spot as the guys you can count on. They had to hold back. Grabbing everything in sight would have blown the whole operation. They got formal contracts, replaced handshakes. Transparency became their shield. They realized that if you lose your good name, no amount of money buys it back. Reputation became the most valuable asset on the balance sheet. At the same time, their roots went deeper. They didn't push local leaders around, they just became impossible to ignore. Big decision coming up? They got the call. Policy changing? They were already prepared. They weren't guests anymore. They were fixtures. In a recovering nation, simply being reliable makes you the authority. This is where they lock it in, turning just surviving into an empire. By the end of this run, they weren't just helping rebuild the Philippines, they were deciding what the new Philippines looked like. As the dust settled on reconstruction, the game changed. It wasn't about just recovering anymore, it was about running the show. The Philippines started steadying out, and you know what they say, stability brings a crowd. Big money rolled in. International giants showed up with deep pockets and serious swagger. That home court advantage, that street smarts earned the hard way, suddenly it had to go toe-to-toe with the global heavyweights. One rich family saw the writing on the wall instantly and switched gears before the tide could turn against them. They tightened the ship. It was all about structure now. They shuffled their holdings and put risk in its own little box. The days of one boss calling all the shots were gone. Now it was about committees and councils. This was the turning point where gut survival instinct morphed into cold, hard corporate discipline. In a place like the Philippines, where one bad week could wipe out a decade of work, this family realized that staying power mattered more than a quick win. Sure, growth tapped the brakes a bit, but their roots dug way deeper. The heat cranked up from the outside, rules got stricter, the public started demanding more. Success brings eyeballs, right? Instead of fighting back, these dynasties embraced the red tape. Following the rules became their shield. Good governance became their new leverage. By riding the wave of reform instead of swimming against it, a wealthy family positioned themselves as a pillar of national stability, not just some private profiteers. Inside the walls, it was all about who's next. The founding fathers took a step back. The heirs? They weren't coddled. They were put through the ringer. You didn't get the keys just because of your last name. You had to earn your stripes. It was a rough transition, no doubt, but absolutely essential. Dynasties crumble when the kids think they're entitled to the throne. The families that stuck around knew that truth cold. By the time this chapter closed, power had a whole new look. It was quieter, deeper. The Philippines didn't feel like a battleground anymore. It felt like their backyard. Now, the real test was staying relevant in a world that was getting louder and faster by the second. Could their old-school discipline survive modern pressure? Then modernization flipped the script again. As the Philippines shifted into high gear, you couldn't just rely on patience and staying quiet. News traveled instantly. Public opinion turned into concrete overnight. Power that used to operate in the shadows was now one slip-up away from being blasted all over the headlines. A wealthy family spotted the risk early on. Adapting wasn't just a nice idea, it was strictly survival. This part of the story was a tug-of-war between tradition and pure speed. Computers reshaped where the money went. Global sharks swam into local waters with aggressive game plans. Younger customers wanted to see the receipts, they wanted values, not just a solid product. Being mysterious used to be an asset, now it just made you irrelevant. A wealthy family had to walk a tightrope, stay private without vanishing, and step into the light without losing the reins. Behind closed doors, things got tense. The young guns pushed for modernization, big branding, and opening up. The old guard stood their ground on keeping things quiet and insulated. It wasn't personal, it was purely strategic. The calls made here would decide if the legacy leveled up or cracked apart. Boardrooms got bigger, advisors came from everywhere, gut feelings got swapped out for hard data. A wealthy family learned to speak the language of the modern world. On the outside, they stopped trying to dominate and started trying to align. They partnered up with institutions, regulators, and civic projects. It wasn't about chasing clout, it was about positioning. In the Philippines, where trust is a long game, these families reframed their influence as participation, not control. They showed up when things got shaky, stepped back when the noise got too loud, and made moves when silence might send the wrong message. This chapter is all about taking the pressure without buckling. It's about learning to operate in the broad daylight after centuries in the shade. The test ahead wasn't about staying alive or getting bigger, it was about staying relevant in a world that refuses to hit the brakes. Being relevant brought a whole new bag of risks. As the vibe shifted, influence wasn't just about the numbers anymore. People wanted to know your intentions. In the Philippines, memories got sharper, and history was getting a second look through modern eyes. A wealthy family realized that yesterday's wins didn't give them a free pass today. Their legacy now needed an explanation, a clear direction, and proof that they actually stood for something. Welcome to the era of recalibration. Influence shifted from gripping the wheel tightly to building the roads everyone drove on. These families poured money into education, standards, and institutions that kept the whole country steady. They stopped worrying about winning the next contract and started worrying about how the next generation would grade their homework. A wealthy family learned that street cred builds up faster than cash, but it crumbles twice as fast if you ignore it. The story mattered. We're not talking propaganda. We're talking clarity. They wrote down their histories. They explained their contributions. Silence got swapped for carefully chosen transparency. In the Philippines, where trust is all about relationships, this shift was huge. When folks understand why the power exists, they don't fight it as hard. A wealthy family didn't need secrecy for protection anymore. Legitimacy became their armor. Inside, they polished their values. Risk assessment wasn't just about dollars anymore. It was about social impact and keeping the lights on for the long haul. Decisions slowed down, more deliberate, weighed by consequences instead of just opportunities. That restraint wasn't weakness. It was confidence stacked up over decades. A wealthy family at this level didn't fear the spotlight anymore because they'd already done their homework on accountability. This chapter is purely about maturity. It's power that doesn't twitch, it stabilizes. What's coming next isn't about getting bigger, it's about endurance. It's being tested by the clock rather than the battlefield. The final exam didn't come as a war or a crash. It showed up as doubt. In a Philippines changed by globalization, widening inequality, and public eyes everywhere, power itself was on trial. Systems that people used to trust were getting side-eyed. You couldn't just assume influence was a good thing anymore. For the first time in forever, a wealthy family couldn't rely on history or keeping their mouth shut to justify their spot at the table. Economic shocks hit out of nowhere. Markets moved faster than the banks could keep up. Social pressure boiled over as the younger crowd demanded accountability, transparency, and a reason for it all. What used to happen behind closed doors was now playing out on the main stage. A wealthy family faced a massive choice: hide behind the old walls or adapt to a world that stopped accepting silence as an answer. Inside these dynasties, the debates got sharp. Some wanted to keep their distance, others wanted to jump in the mix. The tension wasn't emotional, though it was structural. Legacy wasn't about survival or being the boss anymore. It was about mattering. A wealthy family figured out that sticking around depended on getting in sync with the society they worked in, especially in the Philippines, where memory and moral judgment hang around for a long time. Looking outward, engagement took the place of insulation. Being seen selectively became a must. When crises popped up, these families moved fast, backing stability instead of taking advantage of the chaos. Their moves showed something earned over generations: restraint, guided by responsibility. Influence, when you use it right, could actually steady the boat instead of rocking it. This chapter separates the trust fund kids from the true legacy builders. Plenty of names vanished when the heat turned up. The ones left standing proved that power can evolve without losing its discipline. The final scorecard wasn't about control, it was about trust kept over the long haul. At the end of the day, the story was never really about the cash, the dominance, or the expansion. Those were just the tools in the box. What lasted was intention shaped by hard experience. In the Philippines, where these families started as outsiders and became insiders over the years, the final lesson was crystal clear. Power only survives if it builds stability for everyone else, too. A wealthy family that ignored that truth eventually faded out, no matter how big their empire looked on paper. Decades of surviving, adapting, and holding back taught them that influence is toughest when it lifts up the society around it. These families had seen exile, war, rebuilding, and total transformation right there on Philippine soil. They got it. Getting rich without empathy just breeds enemies, while wealth paired with responsibility buys you protection. A wealthy family that poured into institutions, people, and continuity ended up woven right into the nation's DNA. Strategically, their journey laid out some timeless rules. Diversify, but make it make sense. Grow, but never faster than you can manage. Guard your rep just as fiercely as your bank account, because a bad name sticks faster and hits harder than a bankruptcy. Above all, remember that a legacy isn't an automatic inheritance. It has to be renewed by every single generation. A wealthy family that treated their history like a free pass lost it. The ones that treated it like a duty kept it. There's also a deeply human truth buried under all that strategy. These families survived because the Philippines cracked the door open when others slammed their shut. That gratitude, flipped into responsibility, became their quiet North Star. By choosing restraint over excess and pitching in instead of taking over, they prove that deep pockets and humanity don't have to be enemies. If this saga of hidden power, resilience, and legacy in the Philippines struck a chord with you, don't just sit there, make a move. Smash that subscribe button for more untold histories of influence and elite dynasties. Share this video with someone who values deep dives over flashy spectacles. And hey, drop a line in the comments, tell us which lesson hit home for you.